Those of you who know me know that I've spent the last 3 or 4 decades seeking out and documenting the last classic liners and cruise ships. I was on such a journey in September of 2006 aboard the venerable SS Monteray on her final cruise for MSC Cruises. As I stood on the Monteray's starboard promenade, one of the newest and largest cruise ships in the world was making its way into Palermo. This ship was the antithesis of a smaller classic ship at the time, and while I can't say I was thrilled to see it, I learned a long time ago in my ship documenting pursuits, just aim, shoot, and save the judgment for later. In this case, I'm so happy we delayed our plans to run off and grab a cappuccino in one of Palermo's local cafes. This particular ship, while just another one of Carnival Corporation's Conquest-class platform ships, with a few tweaks here and there, would soon become the poster child for modern cruise ship disasters. Only 2 months old, the Costa Concordia measured 114,147 gross tons and carried up to 3,780 passengers with a crew of 1,100. Versus our little old pup, the Monteray, a former cargo ship that was rebuilt for cruising in 1956, and in her final incarnation measured 21,400 gross tons with a capacity for 929 passengers. In sum, our ship was less than a fifth the size of this new behemoth, and yet by today's standards, the Concordia would be considered average-sized. And again, judging by today's standards, the Concordia wasn't so bad looking. Her big yellow and blue Costa funnel was actually quite appealing, and while she was rather hefty, her lines and profile were relatively pleasing and well balanced. This is all part of the time-held tradition of ship-loving. What we hate today will eventually be seen with a tolerant or even adoring eye in the future. So for those of us who bemoan today's mega cruise ships, just point, shoot, and judge later. I can promise you this, what's coming down the road in ship design will make today's ships look good. Now back to the Concordia. This would be my only opportunity to document her before she made headlines for all the wrong reasons. When fashion model Eva Herzigova christened the $450 million Concordia during the ship's float-out the prior year, the champagne bottle didn't initially break, which in maritime tradition is considered bad luck. Whoever scored that bottle must still be asking themselves if they had just cut a little deeper into that glass, would things have turned out differently. Named for the Roman goddess of agreement or concord in marriage and society, the Concordia was the first conquest platform ship to join the Costa fleet. Carnival's Conquest class was a stretch version of its Destiny platform, which when introduced in 1996 was the largest in the world and the first to exceed 100,000 gross tons. While retaining the same mechanics and overall layout as the Carnival ships, the Costa ships also shared the same interior designer, Miami-based Joe Farkas. At the time, Farkas's over-the-top entertainment decor was received with mixed acclaim, with many Costa fans lamenting the Italian design and more intimate size of the line's older ships. But now, many Costa fans miss the pizzazz of Farkas's style versus the generic look and yet larger proportions of the most recent LNG-powered Costa ships, which are 2/3 larger than the Concordia. Impatiently I watched, caffeine-deprived and stomach-gurgling a bit, as the Concordia slowly backed into the adjacent berth, eventually enveloping the little Monteray in her shadow. Finally, with the big giant berth next to us, we could head off for that cappuccino, or maybe 2 or 3, and throw in a pizza margherita while we were at it. Despite the ungainly additions to her superstructure, Monteray was beautifully maintained and would finish off her 50 years of service with dignity. In a couple weeks, with her name shortened to Monty, she would sail off to Alang for scrapping. And by the way, you can find some of the items I rescued from her on my midshipcentury.com website. Indeed, as Monteray slowly pulled away that day, I kept thinking the Concordia had the much better view. A fierce rivalry between privately owned MSC and Carnival-owned Costa exists to this day, so it was nice that Monteray made the effort to salute the Concordia, even if it wasn't acknowledged by the larger ship. One day, perhaps, if there's any interest, I'll tell the Monteray's story. She was one of the handful of ships I grew up with on the U.S. West Coast after becoming smitten with cruise ships and ocean liners. As for the Concordia, I don't think she could ever look better than she did that afternoon, bathed in sunlight with the dramatic Sicilian landscape and just the right amount of clouds hovering above. Located some 95 miles north of Rome on the Tuscan coast, Porto San Stefano is where you get a ferry to the island of Giglio. When we arrived, I was happy to see the handsome 1973-built Isola del Giglio arriving. The former Danish ferry was the oldest, most interesting, and best-looking of the ferries serving Giglio. Her decor, of course, is typical, very simple, but she was beautifully maintained. We settled in on the starboard outer deck by that streamlined funnel that reminded me of Incrus Line's Victoria, an old favorite many of you may remember. The 15 or so mile crossing takes a little over an hour and costs between 13 and 16 euros. And by the way, this is the competing Torrimar ferry Giuseppe Rum, which was built in 2005. We enjoyed a smooth, relaxing ride that afternoon. And then, with Giglio's shoreline encroaching, we could make out the backlit apparition of the largest passenger shipwreck in history. Had we not already known what lay ahead, we could have easily dismissed it as some sort of shoreside hotel or resort. But as we got closer, that white mass in front of us was unmistakable. The sheer scale of the wreck seemed so much larger than even this footage conveys. 9 months had passed since the Costa Concordia, under the command of Captain Francesco Schettino, had her fateful encounter with Giglio's shores. With 3,206 passengers and 1,023 crew on board, and his mistress on the bridge, the captain did what many before him had done by bringing his ship within saluting distance of the port. Many retired Italian officers and crew live on the beautiful island and have through the ages welcomed these encounters with excitement and pride. However, Schettino miscalculated and was either too close or too far from shore. After striking a reef that ripped a 174-foot gash into the ship's hull, the Concordia immediately lost power, began to list to her starboard side, and went adrift. The wind and currents brought the ship to rest on an embankment near the port. Had they taken the ship out to sea, she would have sank in deep water with a staggering loss of life. With barely an hour before the last ferry back, we raced up to the top of the hill overlooking Porto Giglio to take in the full scope of the 952-foot-long wreck, which was surrounded by cranes and heavy lift gear. The top of the funnel had already been removed in preparation for righting the ship onto an undersea platform that was being built under her keel to prevent the Concordia from sliding down the embankment into deep water. Through a complex process called parbuckling, chains, cables, and winches would be used to right the ship. Then sponsons would be added to enable it to float so it could be towed away. Conducted by the Dutch firm Smit, this would be the largest marine salvage operation undertaken and would cost up to $2 billion. Meanwhile, the Isolo del Giglio was leaving, and our ride back, the Giuseppe room, was just arriving, so we took a few last shots and raced back down to the port. For me, seeing the wreck in person gave it so much more resonance. Aside from crashing the ship, Captain Schettino waited an hour before giving orders to abandon ship. As the Concordia's list grew worse, 3 of her portside boats couldn't be launched. Adding insult to injury, Schettino fled the scene in one of the early boats, claiming he fell into it. Thankfully, there were a lot of heroes that night as well, between the Italian Coast Guard, the ship's officers and crew, and passengers who rose to the occasion. Many escaped by climbing over the ship's capsized hull, lowering themselves via rope ladders onto local boats or into the water. Giglio's residents took many of the displaced into their homes, and eventually all returned to the mainland on the 2 ferries we rode that day. All in all, 32 people died that night, but had the ship not drifted back ashore, the death toll would have been in the thousands. Captain Schettino is serving a 16-year sentence for manslaughter for causing the accident and abandoning the ship. In July of 2014, a year and a half after I filmed this, the work was finally completed and the wreck was towed to Genoa for dismantling. The Concordia's story is one of many layers. There is victory and accomplishment that we can build such massive complex objects. The accident itself was hubris and fake pride as well as cowardice, and then there was heroism and kindness in the rescue process, and finally determination, skill, and more accomplishment in raising and removing the ship. In February of 2015, I found myself back in one of my favorite cities, Genova, or as she is known to the locals, La Superba. This would be my final encounter with the Costa Concordia, which was berthed along a seawall in the northern part of the port. Kept afloat by those massive sponsons, she had arrived 6 months prior. It was hard to believe this was the same ship I captured at Palermo 8.5 years earlier. Even though she was unfortunately backlit, you can see the warping and damage to her starboard side. 4 months after I filmed this, the wreck was towed about 10 miles to the San Giorgio del Porto shipyard for dismantling. The process was completed on July 7th, 2017. Thank you for watching, and please do that like and subscribe thing to help those pesky algorithms recognize this channel. Oh yes, and one more thing. This book, Concordia, by Jonathan Danko Kikowski, is filled with photos taken on board the wreck at Genoa. It's available at nautiques.net, a good friend of this channel, and the best purveyor of ocean liner collectibles.